Hello, this is Jock and Coach of the San Francisco Swampert, and today I wanted to put together a little bit of kind of an explainer on why I drafted what I did. I guess you could call it a draft analysis. My thought process behind why I think things look good, how I plan to use them, all that kind of information here. So, starting us off, let's take a look at the first pick I went with, and that would be my Infernape. The nicknames have all been decided upon by my sister, who has been in charge of my nicknames since season 8, I believe now. That was the first season in a while I won a championship, and every season I've asked her for the nicknames, I've won it. So I'm gonna keep it going until the pattern is broken. So this is Burger F, the Infernape. The main reasoning behind drafting this thing, I don't think it was the scariest tier 1 available. If we take a look, there's quite a lot of things I would consider to be more powerful off the bat. But what I like that Infernape brings to the table is utility. It's able to do a number of roles, and it can do them quite well. So just looking at the stats, you can see it's got good speed, even offensive stats, and it has the coverage to back that up. It can go either physical or special. It gets a wide move pool of things that are quite nice to have. Big ones being things like Encore, Taunt, Knockoff, Stealth Rocks, even stuff like Switcheroo. So it's going to have the ability to be a supporting member, or both the physical and special coverage to be an effective offensive member. Like you can see on the set I've put together here. Nasty Plot Vacuum Force with Fire Blast, with just its stabs lets it be very threatening special. Same on the physical side of things, it carries very important physical moves like Earthquake and Gunk Shot that let it hit things you don't think fire types traditionally could hit. So I'm excited to kind of be able to be flexible, bring what I think looks good in a week. Hopefully catch teams off guard if they have, say, like one specific thing that can answer Infernape and it's very specially bulky but not physically. That's the kind of matchup Infernape's looking for that I think it'll really be able to take advantage of because of this wide move pool and good stat spread. So that's the kind of role I'm seeing it in. I should say multiple, could be a pivot, could be a sweeper. I think its advantage is that it's going to be hard to prepare for. And that theme kind of runs over here when we get to our second member, which would be Quinoa the Azelf. Similar situation to the Infernape. Once again, high speed with even attacking stats in both special and physical. And it does also get the move pool to back that up. I would say its special move pool is a little bit better, but physical Azelf is definitely a possibility and something that could be run. So a similar situation to Infernape. Should you see that the opponent has an answer that's specially defensive and not physically, or vice versa, Azelf is able to take advantage of things like that thanks to the moves. For example, getting the elemental punches, Sand Headbutt, I believe, Play Rough. Yeah. And then Sword Stance, if I'm not mistaken. No Sword Stance. So it doesn't get the setup on the physical side of things, but similar to Infernape, but very good at supporting as well. T-Wave, Knockoff, Encore, U-Turn can bring in other team members. And then even on the set, you can see here, Choice Scarf, Mystical Power can function in a similar role to what people would think of as a Moxie Sweeper almost, with Mystical Power raising its special attack, Choice Scarf helping to make sure it's the fastest thing on the field. If the opponent doesn't have a Dark type or its Dark type has been knocked out already, an Azelf set like this could be something that could clean up a game all on its own. So I think that is, once again, kind of running with the theme of the team so far, that it is fast and hard to prepare for. Next up, we have Buggy 4. Now, this is a little bit of the opposite of the previous two members. Low Kicks does not have good coverage. In fact, I would think the main thing you're getting outside of Bug Dark would really only be fighting. But because of Tinted Lens, it's really good at using its Bug and Dark coverage effectively. So Low Kicks' role isn't so much like the others that it's going to be a surprise and hard to prepare for. You know exactly what Low Kicks is doing. It's either going to be this kind of Swords Dance setup set, or it's just going to be something probably banded with First Impression or Sucker Punch. That said, that's still hard for a lot of teams to deal with, and it pairs well with Infernape as a defensive partner, that it can eat psychic moves Infernape doesn't want to. And Tinted Lens ensures that anything it wants to hit, it's comfortable clicking things like First Impression even versus Steel types who aren't going to appreciate taking it thanks to that Tinted Lens ability. If I'm remembering correctly, stuff like Corviknight is still taking about 30 to 40% from a First Impression with the Choice Band low kick, so very threatening offensive Pokemon. Doesn't quite fit the theme of the other two, but like I said, even if you know what's coming from this thing, a lot of teams are going to struggle having a defensive answer to it. Our fourth member, and my mascot, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time I have drafted Swampert, Vernon the Swampert, since season 5 or 6. So it's been a while, but it's good to have him back. Picked up some new tricks since he's been gone, mainly in Flip Turn and Knockoff, making him a very effective pivot. He's still got all the same things that I remember enjoying in the past. Pretty good coverage on both the physical and special side for a lot of things that you can hit. The stats that let him use either of those effectively. I think the only move he's missing that might be nice to have would be Scald, that I can remember off the top of my head. But on this kind of team, the main role I have envisioned for him would be something similar to the set you're seeing on screen here. Bulky attacker or a bulky pivot if he leans more to the defensive stats. Coming in, setting up hazards, removing items, getting out to bring in one of the other offensive threats is likely going to be what this Swampert does most weeks. And I think it fits well on the team so far in that needs a ground type, it's a bulky water, both good things to have on any team, but the rest of the team already is not struggling with grass types, which is his one weakness. And things like low kicks and Infernape both beat those grass types. If it's not something that just happens to have grass type coverage, they don't really want to deal with Infernape and low kicks. So I think he fits well with what I've got so far. Not as much to say here compared to other members of the team, but I think he is going to be surprisingly crucial in making the team work. If I'm not finding good success, I would imagine it's because I'm probably not using Swampert well. All right, then we have our fifth member here, which would be Semicolon the Revavroom. Now, this is one that I was interested in using, mainly because it's got a neat typing and its offensive stats look better than I remember. So that 119 attack is quite high considering most of the things present in the league. And the 90 speed is a respectable amount. I've got things that are faster, so it didn't have to be like the top end speed on the team. And the defensive stats with the HP and physical defense in particular, especially with Filter, make this a lot bulkier than people would often expect. Looking over some of the damage calcs, this thing could probably work as like a bulky pivot in a similar vein to Swampert, as long as it knows it's only got to check certain things. I don't think it's quite as like, oh yeah, just throw it on there and forget. But looking and identifying, oh, there's specific matchups this week that I think Revavroom could take advantage of and be bulky, maybe even set up on, because it does get setup options. The most interesting one, in my opinion, being Shift Gear, 2 speed, 1 attack, as well as Toxic T-Spikes. So he could be quite good as something that comes in, eats a hit with that good typing, especially in relation to opposing fairies. I think he's going to be very useful. But yeah, I could see a bulky set with, something odd like maybe Curse and Toxic being very effective against a lot of teams. But the standard kind of Revavroom set's going to be closer to what I have on the screen here. Gogshot Iron Head being his 2 main stabs. High Horsepower is probably his best coverage move. And then either Parting Shot or Shift Gear being quite common. But that said, 2 decent abilities. I can already see multiple use cases for both of these on different weeks in the league. So I think it'll be a valuable member that this thinking about it, this might be the first time anyone has drafted it in the league. So hopefully I can show some people that we've been underestimating him. Next up is an old favorite of mine that I have come back to here. That would be Florges, Hesperia, California, the Florges. I don't know what to say. I think the most recent time I used this thing would have been season 9. I picked it up for a couple of weeks at the end of the season there. but I have drafted it before. I remember in some of the early seasons. Amazing special defense, good special attack. As you can see here, if invested, it can even function decent as a physical check to some things. The move pool has gotten a little bit better since the last time I had drafted it, picking up things like Psychic Noise or Chilling Water. But it's the reason I drafted it wasn't so much for that. It's for the same old tricks you're going to get out of Florges in things like Wish Passing and Calm Mind setup, and being very annoying in that it can come and take very little damage and still dish out large hits with its stab Moonblast mainly. I think this and Swampert are going to be kind of the defensive backbone of the team. They're the only things with either high HP or high defensive stats. So they're going to have to work together, and I think they will. Especially, like I mentioned, Wish Passing being very useful, even in cases with something like a bulky Reverum, or even, I forgot to mention this, but something like a bulk up Infernape would appreciate the Wish Passing. So that's its main value here. Special Wall, Wish Passer, still can be a special attacking breaker if need be. Not going to spend too much time on Florges because I think most people are familiar with it. Next up we have Burfy the Cincino. Now, I think this is the first time I have drafted Cincino in this league, but I have quite the history with Cincino outside of the league. This was one of the things that I first used on the very first OU team I ever put together myself back in Gen 6 and really enjoyed using back then with Skill Link. So now having loaded dice added to the game opens up its ability to run Technician. Getting Tidy Up gives it a better setup option. It's picked up Triple Axle. So this thing has gotten even better than last time I was using it, and I think it's going to be quite threatening to a number of teams. The only thing that's really stopping it is a good Steel type, and I think I have good answers to that, mainly through Infernape, Reverum, Swampert. So I think this can catch a lot of people off guard on both its speed and its utility, because something else I should mention while I'm here, this is one of my 2 hazard removal options. So Tidy Up is not just going to be set up, but also a way to clear webs, rocks, spikes, whatever, if I feel they're going to be an issue. So Cincino, probably going to be one of my fastest things. If we take a look here, you can see 116, 115, 115. So it's up there at the top end of the team. Something that I can keep in mind for, hey, I really need the speed is, don't forget about Cincino. Alright, then we have Decidueye. Remus the Decidueye. I am interested in Decidueye for a couple reasons. This is my second form of removal. This is my defog user. And it has a couple other things going for it outside of that that caught my attention. One of them being long reach. Looking over the draft, there were a couple Pokemon that I noticed will already be good use cases for this, with abilities like Effect Spore, Static, Flame Body, but even past that, long reach, preventing it from taking any Rocky Helmet damage will be quite nice a lot of times, especially when I want to use it as a sweeper. But it does have some other interesting things going for it. Another U-turn knockoff user, high special defense and decent HP, along with, if I'm not mistaken, Synthesis, means that it can function as a special wall if I need it to, because I feel Florges has a bad matchup for whatever reason. Although they do share some weaknesses, so that's probably unlikely. The ability to do so is nice. He gets some great other coverage though. Sucker Punch, Shadow Sneak, not forced into Poltergeist thanks to his unique move Spirit Shackle. So he's got a lot of stuff that's like, that does kind of put Decidueye over the edge a little more than I remembered. I thought he was interesting. So I don't know if I would say he was the best Grass Ghost available. I'm a big Brambleghast fan, but I wanted to try something and Decidueye sounded fun. So that was the main thinking behind why we went with Decidueye. Alright, up next we have Gunpeito, the Minior. Now, Minior is kind of a deceiving Pokemon, and if you watched the team review and saw my section of it, Makeda correctly pointed out, this is a little bit deceiving. If we come over here just look at Minior. You can see there's two forms. It doesn't show the stats here, but they're effectively flipped. The Meteor form will have 100 in defenses and 60s in offenses, as well as a 60 in speed. So the way that it works, when Minior reaches half HP, it's going to change into this form with the better offensive stats. The reason that can be so threatening is Minior can be a Shell Smash sweeper. With these kind of stats and a Shell Smash, there's not a lot that appreciates coming in on Minior, especially because it's one of the few flying types that can run acrobatics quite easily if it's running Shell Smash. But even if it's not running acrobatics, it's very threatening because it can go physical or special like a lot of other things on this team. Its special coverage is actually, I would say, a little bit nicer than its physical coverage, mainly because it picks up the Dazzling Gleam in there, and it has a couple other fun things like the Charge Beam that it gets on the special side. But even if you're going to go physical, you can run a set that looks something like this, Stone Edge, and if I'm remembering correctly, when it's in core form like this and a Shell Smash off, it's approaching 700 speed. So there's not a lot that's going to be able to keep up with it outside of priority users. And although the attack stat isn't quite as high as you might like on something like this, Shell Smash does make up for it. And looking over the calcs against some teams already, Minior is something that I could see cleaning up full 6 by itself in a perfect world. So it's very threatening. I think it's going to catch a lot of teams off guard, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a number of teams that don't fully understand how it works that might also work in my favor. So I have some high hopes for how Minior is going to turn out here. Next up, we have Zebraham, the Zebstrika. Now this, I must admit, I basically copied Young Badge and his Jolteon's homework last season. He also did Swampert Zebstrika. Looking it over after I picked up the Swampert and was looking at Terra Captains, I went, you know, that's not a bad idea. I think he had the right call there and followed suit, drafted the Zebstrika, and I think it's going to be very interesting to make use of it. He did an excellent job last season kind of laying out the design document on how it should be used of its bests. Suited to kind of be a late game sweeper when the ground types have been removed and it's comfortable clicking its electric moves, especially because the attack, like Minior, not as high as you would like. It's probably going to be Banded, Life Orb, Expert Belt, a lot of weeks to make up for that. So it appreciates teammates that are able to remove ground types and bring it in safely. I think this team does that, so I felt comfortable drafting it. And the fact that the Terra type is open and it could be any makes it a little scarier, I think, even than last season, because now you won't know whether it's going to go something like water to beat your ground types, flying to avoid some ground type damage, or just the flavor of the week when it comes to whatever Terra type it needs to beat specific offensive checks, whether that's something like Fairy or Steel or Rock. So I think Zebstrika is going to be, as we saw last season, quite threatening here. I'm hoping I'm able to replicate even some of what Young Badge was able to do with it, and if that's the case, I'll feel like I got some good value out of it. Finally, we have Dripathy the Macargo. Now this is one I know Makeda in particular is not too high on, and he might be correct there, but I have an interesting couple ideas I want to try out with this thing that I thought, I can give it a shot. Worst case, I drop it before the trade deadline and pick up something else that might be a little more useful. But looking it over, in Tier 5, I wanted a defensive Terra Captain, and I think this does fit the bill. 80 Spadef, 120 physical defense, 60 HP. The HP is a little bit lacking, but the defensive stats were some of the highest that I was able to find in the tier, and a couple other interesting things where Cargo has access to recover. Moves like Acid Armor, and if I'm not mistaken, Amnesia. So it's able to boost those defenses even higher potentially, and the key here is that it's going to be able to tear out of this pretty bad defensive typing. So once it gets into something like Fairy or Water or Steel, the more traditionally good defensive typings, I think this thing's going to be able to do a lot of work. Now the only downside, and I will admit it's a pretty big one, it doesn't get a lot of the things you think of defensively minded Pokemon traditionally wanting. No toxic, although it does get access to some poison moves. It doesn't get things like body press that a lot of defense boosting sweepers like to have, but that doesn't mean it's completely without interesting things. Gyro Ball and its slow speed could be quite nice. Pain Split I can already see having some use cases. It gets both screens. It's going to get access to Stealth Rock and Will-O-Wisp. So I think there are cases that this thing can this thing can prove to be quite annoying to deal with defensively, that are going to catch people off guard, not expecting it to be able to do so just because of that bad Fire Rock typing. Now, that said, there is some other things that I'm hoping to do with this Magcargo that I think could be pretty fun. Outside of Flame Body, it gets Weak Armor. It also is another Shell Smash sweeper. So, idea being, you take Weak Armor, a defensive typing that's going to resist something that would want to hit Magcargo, let's say a ground type, so you take Grass Terra, you take Weak Armor, you take Shell Smash, get the Shell Smash off, suddenly you're at +4 speed with +2 special attack and base 90 special attack, you're going to do some damage. So I think this could be an interesting Terra Captain. I think it's going to be fun to try and make it work. Will it work? That remains to be seen. So we'll see, but I think it's got some high potential. Overall with the team, I think it fit what I was going for. I wanted to try a more hyper offensive minded team this season because I felt I had been doing a lot of bulkier teams. And while those have been successful, I have always enjoyed hyper offense more. It was the archetype that won me my first championship back in Season 2, so I wanted to kind of go back to my roots, see what I could do here. So, this is going to be my most recent attempt at hyper offense, basically, and I think I've put together a decent core to get it started. I'll have to see how I'm able to play it out, and if I still remember how to do it now is the question. So, I think if this team does poorly, it's going to be more operator error than construction. I think I've put together a good team. So that'll be it for the initial kind of draft analysis quick overview. Thank you for watching.